Babes, I'm going on a date with my new lover. The words hit me like a truck. I was in the middle of adjusting the thermostat in the hallway, one hand still gripping the dial, when Julie, my wife of 14 years, casually dropped that grenade. She leaned against the kitchen counter, scrolling on her phone, her blonde hair falling like a curtain of deceit over her smug face. "What nonsense is this?" I said, my voice sharper than I expected. The muscles in my neck tightened as I turned to look at her. Julie glanced up from her phone, her green eyes sparkling, not with guilt, but with some twisted thrill. "Oh, sorry, babe," she said, waving her manicured hand dismissively. "But I promised him a wild night." Promised him a wild night. It took every ounce of restraint not to throw the nearest vase across the room. My breath caught in my chest as the meaning of her words seeped into my mind like poison. "Who is he?" I growled, stepping closer. She smirked and shrugged, as if she were talking about some mundane shopping errand instead of a betrayal that was about to destroy everything we'd built. "Oh, his name's Chase. You don't know him. But trust me, he's satisfying." The venom in her voice was subtle, but it was there. It was enough. "Julie, if you walk out that door," I said slowly, my voice shaking but firm, "our marriage is over. 14 years, gone. Are you seriously willing to throw it all away for some random fling?" I expected hesitation. A flicker of regret. Something. But Julie just laughed. Laughed. The sound was so cold it made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. "Come on, Liam," she said, still smiling like the queen of spite. "You're so dramatic. Lighten up, will you? It's just one night. I'll be back before you know it." That was it. The last straw. "If you leave," I warned, my voice now dangerously calm, "I swear, Julie, you'll regret it." But she didn't take me seriously. She slipped on her heels, grabbed her purse, and strutted out the door as if she owned the world. "Don't wait up," she called over her shoulder with that sing-song tone that used to be endearing but now sounded like pure cruelty. As the door slammed shut behind her, the house suddenly felt cavernous and cold. My hands were trembling, but not from sadness. No, it was anger. Fury unlike anything I'd ever felt before. The kind of rage that makes your vision blur and your heart pound so hard it feels like it's trying to escape your chest. I stood there for a moment, staring at the door. And then, something inside me snapped. I stood in the silence of my own home, a house that now felt as alien as the woman who had just walked out the door. Julie. Julie, my wife, had not only betrayed me, but she had done so with the kind of arrogance that left no room for denial. She didn't even bother lying or hiding it. She flaunted her betrayal in my face like it was some badge of honor. I sat down heavily on the couch, my head in my hands, trying to process what had just happened. Memories of the last few months flashed through my mind like a slideshow of red flags I had ignored. Julie's sudden obsession with her appearance, the new wardrobe, the late nights working on a project, and the text messages she guarded like state secrets. It all made sense now, and I felt like a fool for not putting the pieces together sooner. But the real discovery, the one that would confirm everything, was yet to come. The anger boiling in my chest needed an outlet. I stormed to our shared bedroom, yanked open her closet, and started rifling through her things. It wasn't snooping, I had every right to know what was going on. My hands shook as I dug through her drawers, searching for, what, exactly? Evidence? Proof? Maybe I just needed something tangible to anchor my rage. Then I found it. Her tablet. Julie was terrible with passwords, and as I suspected, she hadn't bothered changing it from the usual Julie 123. I powered it on and waited for the screen to light up. The moment it did, I knew I had hit the motherlode. The messages were all there, bold as brass. Chats with Chase, filled with emojis and the kind of language that made my stomach churn. It wasn't just flirtation, it was detailed, intimate, and explicit. She had been planning this wild night for weeks, down to the restaurant reservation and the hotel suite. There were even pictures, ones I wish I could unsee, of her in lingerie I didn't recognize, posing provocatively in our bedroom. I couldn't breathe. My vision blurred with rage, and for a moment, I thought I might actually black out. How could she do this? How could she bring another man into the sanctity of our home, use the space we had built together as a staging ground for her affair? And then there was the kicker, a conversation with her best friend, Melissa. Julie had been bragging about her affair like it was some kind of sport. She'd even joked about how clueless I was, how Liam wouldn't dare leave me, he's too soft. My jaw tightened as I read her words, each one cutting deeper than the last. By the time I was done scrolling, my hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped the tablet. My heart was pounding in my ears, my breath coming in shallow gasps. I wanted to punch something, scream, throw the tablet against the wall, but instead, I forced myself to sit down. My emotions were a hurricane, but I needed to stay calm. Losing control wouldn't solve anything. I glanced around the bedroom, at the wedding photo on the nightstand, the shared memories that now felt like a cruel joke. Was any of it real? Had she ever loved me, or had I just been a convenient stepping stone for her ambitions and selfish desires? I decided then and there that I wouldn't be her doormat. Julie thought I was soft, thought I wouldn't dare stand up for myself. She was wrong. If she wanted to play dirty, I could play dirtier. I grabbed my phone and called my best friend, Mark. He'd been my rock for years, the guy I went to when I needed advice or a sounding board. When he picked up, I didn't even wait for him to say hello. "Mark," I said, my voice low and steady. "Julie's cheating on me." There was a pause on the other end of the line, and then, "What? Are you sure?" "I'm sure," I said, my jaw clenched. I found the messages. Pictures. She just walked out to meet him, Mark. She didn't even try to hide it. Mark swore under his breath. "What do you want to do? Do you want me to come over?" "No," I said, shaking my head even though he couldn't see me. "Not yet. I need to think. But I'm not letting her get away with this." Mark hesitated. "Liam. I know you're angry, and you have every right to be. But don't do anything stupid, okay? Take a minute to breathe before you make any big decisions." I nodded, even though I wasn't sure I could promise that. "I'll call you later." After hanging up, I sat in silence for a long time, staring at the tablet in my lap. The anger was still there, burning in my chest, but now it was accompanied by something else, cold, calculating determination. Julie thought she could humiliate me, that she could walk all over me without consequences. She was about to learn just how wrong she was. I got up, grabbed my laptop, and started making plans. If she wanted to destroy our marriage, I would make sure she didn't walk away unscathed. I wasn't going to lash out blindly, I was going to be smart about this. Strategic. Ruthless. By the time Julie came home, I would be ready. Julie waltzed back into the house at nearly 2 a.m., her heels clacking against the wooden floor like a metronome counting down to the explosion. She didn't even try to sneak in quietly, like someone with an ounce of shame might. No, Julie came in humming some tune I didn't recognize, her purse swinging in her hand, a sly smirk plastered on her face. I was sitting on the couch, waiting. Not because I couldn't sleep, but because I wanted her to see me. To face the storm she had created. My laptop was closed but still sitting on the coffee table, and beside it, a manila envelope that she would soon learn the contents of. I'd spent hours preparing myself for this moment, going over every word I was about to say. But the second she stepped into the living room, looking at me like I was nothing more than furniture, the rehearsed speech evaporated. "Well, you're up late," she said, tossing her purse onto the couch beside me. Her tone was dripping with condescension, like I was the one who had something to explain. "Don't tell me you've been sitting here all night, sulking?" I stood up slowly, my fists clenched at my sides. "Where were you, Julie?" My voice was calm, too calm. I could feel the anger simmering beneath the surface, waiting for the right moment to erupt. She rolled her eyes, kicking off her heels with the grace of someone who had perfected the art of indifference. "Oh, Liam, don't start. I already told you, I was out with Chase." The audacity. The absolute gall of this woman to not only admit her affair but to say it so casually, like she was discussing the weather. I stared at her, my blood boiling, but I forced myself to stay composed. I wasn't going to let her manipulate me into losing control. "You didn't just go out, Julie," I said, stepping closer. "You cheated. You betrayed me. You lied to me for months. Do you even care about what you've done to us?" Julie snorted, crossing her arms. "Us? What us, Liam? Let's not pretend we've been happy for years. You're boring. Predictable. I needed something exciting, something alive." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "So instead of talking to me, instead of trying to fix what was broken, you decided to humiliate me? To go behind my back and sleep with some guy?" Her smirk faltered for a moment, but she quickly recovered, her expression hardening. "Oh, please, Liam. Don't act like a victim. You're so busy being the good little husband, you didn't even notice I was miserable." "Chase? He noticed. He made me feel wanted." My jaw tightened, and for a moment, I was tempted to throw all the evidence I'd gathered in her face, the messages, the photos, the damning proof of her infidelity. But I held back. I wanted to see just how far she would go, how many lies she would pile on top of the wreckage. "So this is my fault?" I asked, my voice sharp. "You're the one who broke our vows, Julie. Not me. Don't you dare try to turn this around." She laughed, a cruel, mocking sound that made my stomach churn. "Oh, grow up, Liam. Vows? Marriage? You think those mean anything anymore? People change. Feelings fade. Get over it." That was it. That was the moment the dam broke. I grabbed the manila envelope from the coffee table and slammed it onto the couch between us. Julie flinched, her smug demeanor cracking for the first time. "What's this?" she asked, eyeing the envelope like it was a ticking time bomb. "Open it," I said coldly. She hesitated, then snatched it up and tore it open. Her eyes scanned the papers inside, bank statements, emails, the deed to our house. Slowly, her face turned pale as the reality of what she was looking at sank in. What is this?" she stammered, her voice losing its usual confidence. "It's everything, Julie," I said, my tone like ice. "I've sold the house. Emptied our joint account. The divorce papers are in there, too. You wanted freedom? You've got it." Her head snapped up, her eyes wide with shock. "You can't be serious." "Liam, you wouldn't." "I would. And I did," I cut her off, my voice hard. "You thought I wouldn't fight back, didn't you? You thought I'd just sit here and take it while you tore our life apart. Well, guess what, Julie? You're not the only one who can play dirty." For the first time, Julie looked genuinely panicked. "Liam, listen, we can talk about this." "No," I said firmly, my voice ringing with finality. "We're done talking. You made your choice, and now I'm making mine." She stood there, clutching the envelope like it was a lifeline, her face a mix of anger and desperation. "You'll regret this," she hissed, her voice low and venomous. I met her glare with one of my own. "No, Julie. You're the one who's going to regret it." With that, I turned and walked out of the room, leaving her standing there in stunned silence. For the first time in months, I felt a sense of control, a glimmer of hope that I could rebuild my life without the weight of her betrayal dragging me down. I didn't sleep that night, but not because I was restless or doubting myself. No, for the first time in months, I felt alive. There was a clarity in my mind that I hadn't felt in years, as if shaking off the fog of a toxic relationship. I sat in the kitchen, sipping on a strong cup of coffee, waiting to see what Julie would do next. She didn't disappoint. At around 7 a.m., Julie stormed into the kitchen, the manila envelope still clutched in her hand. She looked like she hadn't slept either, her usually perfect blonde hair a mess and her face twisted in fury. "You've gone too far, Liam," she hissed, slamming the envelope onto the kitchen counter. "Selling the house? Emptying the accounts? Are you insane?" I leaned back in my chair, calm as ever, and sipped my coffee. "Oh, good morning, Julie. Did you enjoy your wild night? Or are you too busy trying to figure out how you're going to explain all of this to Chase?" Her lips curled into a snarl. "Don't you dare talk about Chase. This is between us." I raised an eyebrow. "Oh, it's definitely between us. But you dragged him into this mess the moment you decided to cheat, didn't you?" She folded her arms and glared at me, clearly trying to regain control of the situation. "You're being petty, Liam. Selling the house was a mistake. What are you even trying to prove?" I set my mug down and stood, towering over her. "I'm proving that I'm not the weak, predictable husband you thought I was. You had the audacity to humiliate me, to lie to me, to laugh in my face. You don't get to walk away from this unscathed, Julie." Her defiance faltered for a second, but then she regrouped, her voice sharp and biting. "You think you're so smart, don't you? Emptying our accounts? Selling the house? What do you think that accomplishes? You're just hurting yourself, Liam." I couldn't help but laugh, a cold, humorless sound. "Hurting myself? No, Julie. I'm protecting myself. I spoke to a lawyer last night while you were out playing house with your boyfriend. Did you know that in this state, any shared assets can be split if there's proof of infidelity? And guess what? I have all the proof I need." Her face went white as a sheet, and for a moment, I thought she might actually faint. But instead, she rallied, her voice rising with desperation. "Liam, don't do this. We can fix this. We can work through it." I shook my head, almost laughing again at her sudden change of tone. "Now you want to fix it? Now, after you've lied, cheated, and belittled me for months? Spare me, Julie. The only thing you care about is what you stand to lose." She stepped closer, her tone shifting again, this time soft and pleading. "Liam, please. Think about everything we've been through. 14 years, all the memories, all the love. Doesn't that mean anything to you?" For a split second, I hesitated. Not because I believed her, but because her words reminded me of the man I used to be, the man who had once loved her so deeply he couldn't imagine a life without her. But that man was gone now, replaced by someone stronger, someone who refused to be a victim any longer. "Memories don't erase betrayal," I said quietly. "And love doesn't survive on lies. You made your choice, Julie. Now you'll have to live with it." Her face twisted with rage again, the soft mask she had put on moments ago vanishing in an instant. "Fine," she spat. "But don't think you've won, Liam. You might think you've got the upper hand now, but I'll make you regret this. You have no idea who you're messing with." I smirked, unbothered by her threat. "Oh, I know exactly who I'm dealing with, Julie. A selfish, arrogant woman who thought she could have her cake and eat it too. Newsflash, the bakery's closed." She stormed out of the kitchen, slamming the door so hard the walls shook. I watched her go, my heart pounding, but not with fear or sadness. It was adrenaline, pure and raw. The kind that comes from standing up for yourself after years of being underestimated. Later that day, I got a call from my real estate agent. The house sale was moving faster than I expected, and the buyer wanted to close within the week. Perfect. The sooner I could rid myself of any physical ties to Julie, the better. But the fallout wasn't just limited to our home. Julie, true to her word, tried to fight back. That afternoon, I started getting calls from mutual friends, people I hadn't spoken to in months, suddenly curious about what was happening. Julie had apparently been working overtime, spinning a sob story about how I had blindsided her with divorce papers and stolen our money. Mark called to give me the heads up. "Hey, man, I just got off the phone with Karen. She said Julie's been telling everyone you've lost your mind." I sighed, pinching the bridge of my nose. Let her talk. The truth will come out soon enough. And it did. Within hours, Julie's attempt to control the narrative started to unravel. Screenshots of her texts with Chase accidentally found their way into the group chat she shared with her friends. Melissa, her so-called best friend, wasn't as loyal as she thought. It didn't take long for the whole affair to become public knowledge. By the end of the day, Julie was calling me non-stop, alternating between rage and desperation. I didn't answer. Let her stew in the mess she created. This wasn't my fight anymore, it was hers. By the time the second night rolled around, Julie's facade of confidence had completely shattered. The calls and texts from her had shifted from fiery threats to desperate pleas. At one point, she even left a voicemail, her voice cracking as she begged me to just talk and work things out. But I wasn't in the mood to hear her sob story, not after everything she'd done. I had bigger priorities now. My plan was moving like clockwork, and I wasn't about to let her derail it. The house sale was finalized that morning, and the money was transferred into my newly established account, the one Julie had no access to. I had also locked in a meeting with my lawyer to iron out the final details of the divorce proceedings. There was no turning back. Around noon, Mark came over to check on me. He stepped inside, his usual easygoing demeanor replaced with concern. "You holding up okay?" he asked, dropping a six-pack of beer onto the counter. I shrugged. "I'm fine. Better than fine, actually. I feel free." He raised an eyebrow, cracking open a can. "Free, huh? You don't look it. You look like a man plotting a war." I smirked, taking a beer for myself. "Not a war. Just a clean break. Julie thought she could destroy me, but I'm not going down without a fight." Mark nodded, taking a long sip. "Good. She doesn't deserve to walk away unscathed. You've put up with her crap for way too long." We sat in silence for a moment, the tension hanging heavy in the air. Then Mark said something that caught me off guard. "You know, I always had a bad feeling about her." I frowned, setting my beer down. "What do you mean?" He hesitated, then sighed. "Look, I didn't want to say anything while you were married. But Julie, she's always been a little off. The way she treated you, the way she acted around other guys. I didn't want to stir the pot, but now? I think you deserve to know." My stomach tightened. "What are you saying, Mark? That she's done this before?" He gave me a pointed look. "Let's just say Chase isn't her first rodeo." The revelation hit me like a gut punch. Of course. How could I have been so blind? All those times she'd come home late, the mysterious work trips, the sudden mood swings, I'd chalked it all up to stress or bad timing. But now it all made sense. Julie had been playing this game for years, and I had been too trusting to see it. Mark must have noticed the change in my expression, because he leaned forward, his voice low and serious. "Liam, you're better off without her. Don't let her worm her way back in. She'll only do it again." I nodded, the fire in my chest rekindling. She won't get the chance. Later that evening, Julie showed up unannounced. I heard her car pull into the driveway and debated not answering the door, but something in me wanted to face her. I needed to see her unravel. When I opened the door, she looked like a shadow of the woman she used to be. Her makeup was smudged, her hair disheveled, and her usual confidence replaced with raw desperation. She held a tissue in one hand, dabbing at her eyes as if to paint herself as the victim. "Liam," she said, her voice trembling. "Can we talk? Please?" I crossed my arms, leaning against the doorframe. "Talk about what, Julie? How you destroyed our marriage? How you humiliated me? Or how you've been lying to me for years?" She flinched at my words, but quickly recovered, her hands clasped together like she was praying. "I know I screwed up. I know I hurt you. But, we've been together for 14 years. Doesn't that mean anything to you?" I let out a bitter laugh. "It used to. But then I found out who you really are." Tears welled up in her eyes, but I wasn't moved. "Not this time. Liam, I made a mistake," she said, her voice cracking. "I was lost, I didn't know what I wanted. But now I do. I want us. I want to fix this." I shook my head, my voice cold. "You want to fix this? You didn't seem so concerned about fixing it when you were sending Chase half-naked pictures or planning your wild night. Don't pretend this is about love, Julie. This is about you losing control." Her face twisted with frustration, and for a moment, the real Julie, the selfish, arrogant woman I'd come to know, broke through. "Fine," she snapped. "You want the truth? I cheated because I was bored, Liam. You were too predictable, too nice. Chase made me feel alive. He gave me something you never could." The words stung, but they didn't break me. If anything, they solidified my resolve. "And how's that working out for you, Julie?" I asked, my voice steady. "Because from where I'm standing, you look pretty miserable." She opened her mouth to respond, but I cut her off. "I'm done, Julie. I've already filed the papers. The house is sold, the accounts are empty, and I'm moving on. You can't manipulate me anymore." Her eyes widened, and for a moment, I thought she might try to argue. But then she seemed to realize the futility of it. She stepped back, her shoulders slumping in defeat. "You'll regret this," she said quietly, her voice lacking its usual venom. "No, Julie," I said firmly. "You're the one who's going to regret it." She stared at me for a long moment, then turned and walked back to her car. I watched her go, feeling a strange mix of emotions, relief, anger, sadness, but above all, a sense of closure. This chapter of my life was over, and for the first time in years, I was free. When Julie's car disappeared down the street, I stood in the doorway for a moment longer, taking in the cold evening air. For the first time in years, the weight on my chest felt lighter. It wasn't completely gone, there was still anger simmering beneath the surface, but I had clarity. Julie had underestimated me, played me for a fool, and now she was reaping the consequences. The next morning, I woke up feeling sharper, more focused. My phone buzzed with messages and missed calls, mostly from Julie and a few from mutual friends who'd gotten wind of the drama. I ignored them all. My focus was on the final phase of my plan, ensuring Julie wouldn't be able to claw her way back into my life or sabotage my fresh start. Step 1: Destroying her narrative. Julie had always been a master manipulator. She'd spin any story to make herself look like the victim, and I wasn't about to let her drag my name through the mud. I decided it was time to take control of the narrative. I reached out to Melissa, her so-called best friend. Melissa had been part of Julie's inner circle for years, but from what I'd seen in the text messages, she wasn't exactly thrilled with Julie's antics. I figured I could use that to my advantage. When Melissa picked up, she sounded cautious. "Liam? This is unexpected." "I'm sure it is," I said, keeping my tone measured. "Look, I'm not calling to drag you into the middle of this mess. I just need to ask you something." She hesitated. "What is it?" "You know what Julie's been up to," I said bluntly. "You've seen the messages, the photos. I'm guessing she's already tried to spin some sob story about me being the bad guy. Am I right?" There was a long pause, and then Melissa sighed. "She might have mentioned something. But honestly, Liam, I've had enough of her drama. She's been a nightmare to deal with lately." I smiled to myself. Good. Because I'm done with her, and I need someone to help me make sure the truth gets out. If she tries to twist things, I want people to know what really happened. Melissa agreed without much convincing. She admitted that Julie had burned a lot of bridges over the years, and most of their mutual friends were already fed up with her behavior. By the end of the call, I felt a sense of satisfaction knowing that Julie's web of lies was already starting to unravel. Step 2: Financial checkmate. While Julie had spent the last few months sneaking around with Chase, I'd been quietly preparing for the possibility of divorce. My lawyer had been a lifesaver, guiding me through every step of the process and helping me protect my assets. The house was sold, the joint accounts were emptied, and I'd set up a new account in my name only. But there was one final loose end to tie up: Julie's credit cards. She'd always been reckless with money, and I wasn't about to let her drag me down with her. I called the bank and had her access to our shared credit cards revoked. By the time Julie realized what had happened, she wouldn't be able to charge a single penny to my name. I imagined her at a boutique or a fancy restaurant, trying to pay for something only to have her card declined. The thought brought a small, bitter smile to my face. Step 3: Chase gets a surprise. Julie had gone out of her way to flaunt her affair, so I figured it was only fair to return the favor. I wasn't one for petty revenge, but I couldn't resist the opportunity to disrupt her perfect little fantasy with Chase. Using the information I'd found on her tablet, I tracked down Chase's work email. It wasn't hard. He had a public profile on LinkedIn, complete with contact details. I sent him a short, pointed message. Subject: Thought you should know. Hey Chase, just a heads up, the woman you've been sneaking around with is officially single now. You're welcome to her, but don't be surprised if she does to you what she did to me. Good luck. I didn't expect a reply, but it felt good to send it. Let him deal with the fallout of being entangled with someone like Julie. If nothing else, it might give him a taste of the chaos she brought into my life. Julie's response. By the time Julie realized how thoroughly I had dismantled her life, she was in full meltdown mode. The texts became frantic. Liam, we need to talk. Please, I can explain everything. You're being so cruel. How could you do this to me after everything we've been through? Liam, you're making a huge mistake. Don't let your anger ruin our lives. I didn't respond. What was there to say? She had made her choices, and now she was living with the consequences. That afternoon, she showed up at the house again, pounding on the door like a madwoman. Liam, open the door, she shouted. You can't just cut me out like this. I stayed in the kitchen, calmly sipping my coffee while she screamed and banged outside. Eventually, she gave up and left, her car screeching out of the driveway. The aftermath. By the end of the week, the house was officially out of my name, and I was preparing to move into a new apartment across town. Julie's meltdown had reached new heights, but I stayed resolute. I didn't block her number. I wanted to keep an eye on her antics, but I refused to engage. Her final text that night summed it all up. You'll regret this, Liam. I swear you will. I read it, laughed, and deleted it. Regret? The only regret I felt was not walking away sooner. By the time the weekend rolled around, Julie's life was in free fall, and I could see it unraveling from a safe distance. Mutual friends who'd once sympathized with her were now pulling away, whispers of her affair spreading like wildfire through our social circle. Melissa had come through on her promise, accidentally sharing screenshots of Julie's messages with Chase in the group chat. The betrayal was now public knowledge, and Julie was finding herself increasingly isolated. She tried to fight back, of course. Julie always had to be in control, and losing the narrative was her worst nightmare. I heard from Mark that she'd been calling up friends, claiming I was abusive, manipulative, and unstable. It was classic Julie, turning the tables, painting herself as the victim. But it didn't stick. The evidence was overwhelming, and people weren't buying her sob story anymore. The unexpected visit. I was packing up the last of my belongings when I heard the sound of a car pulling into the driveway. My heart sank. I didn't need to check the window to know it was Julie. She hadn't been to the house since her dramatic door-pounding session a few days earlier, but I figured she'd make another attempt eventually. She walked into the garage, ignoring the fact that she no longer had any claim to the property. The door to the house was unlocked, and she stepped inside like she still owned the place. When I saw her, she looked unrecognizable, no makeup, her hair in a messy ponytail, wearing a sweatshirt and jeans. This wasn't the confident, glamorous Julie I'd married. This was someone unraveling, desperate, grasping at whatever pieces of her life were still intact. "Liam," she said, her voice softer than I'd ever heard it. "Can we talk? Please." I didn't respond immediately. I kept packing, shoving clothes into a duffel bag as if she weren't even there. Finally, I said, "What's left to talk about, Julie? You made your choices. I've made mine." She stepped closer, her hands wringing together nervously. "I know I messed up. I know I hurt you. But can't we just start over? Forget all of this? Go back to the way things were?" I paused, turning to look at her. "Go back to what, exactly? To me being your backup plan? To you sneaking around behind my back while I play the loyal husband? That's not a life, Julie. That's a joke." Her face crumpled, and for a moment, I thought she might actually cry. But then, in true Julie fashion, she shifted gears. The tears that had been threatening to fall vanished, and her expression hardened. "You're being ridiculous," she snapped. "You're throwing away everything we built together because of one mistake." "One mistake?" I repeated, laughing bitterly. "Julie, you've been lying to me for years. Chase isn't the first, is he? How many others were there?" Her silence was all the confirmation I needed. I shook my head, the last shred of sympathy I might have felt for her evaporating. "You know what's funny, Julie? You thought I was too soft, too predictable to ever stand up to you. But here we are. You've lost everything because you underestimated me." She clenched her fists, her face twisting with frustration. "You think you're so righteous, Liam. But you're not perfect. You've made mistakes too." I stared at her, unfazed. "Sure, I've made mistakes. But I never betrayed you. I never treated you like you were disposable. You can try to twist this all you want, but deep down, you know this is on you." Julie opened her mouth to argue, but no words came out. She turned on her heel and stormed out, slamming the door behind her. I watched through the window as she drove away, her car disappearing down the street. This time, I knew it was for good. Rebuilding myself. With Julie out of the picture, I could finally focus on myself. The apartment I'd rented wasn't fancy, but it was mine, and that was all that mattered. I spent the next few days unpacking, setting up my new space, and getting my life back on track. Mark came over to help me settle in, bringing a bottle of whiskey to celebrate my newfound freedom. We sat on the balcony that evening, looking out over the city as the sun dipped below the horizon. You did the right thing, Mark said, raising his glass. Julie was toxic, man. You're better off without her. I nodded, taking a sip of my drink. It's strange, though. Part of me feels relieved. Like I've been carrying this weight around for years, and now it's finally gone. Mark grinned. That's because you're finally free to live your life on your terms. No more Julie, no more lies. Just you. He was right. For the first time in years, I felt like I had control over my life. Julie had tried to break me, but instead, she'd made me stronger. I wasn't the same man I was before this all started. I was sharper, more resilient, and ready to move forward. The last twist. 2 days later, I got a call from Melissa. She sounded hesitant, almost nervous, and I immediately knew something was up. Liam, she said. You're not going to believe this, but Julie's in trouble. I frowned. What kind of trouble? She's been trying to reach out to Chase, Melissa explained. But apparently, he's ghosted her. And now, well, she's been telling people she's going to sue you for emotional damages. I laughed, genuinely amused. Emotional damages? Is that even a thing? Melissa sighed. I wouldn't put anything past her. She's spiraling, Liam. Just, be careful, okay? I thanked her for the warning, but I wasn't worried. Julie could try whatever desperate tactics she wanted, but I had the truth, and the law, on my side. Her threats were nothing more than the flailing of someone who had finally lost control. As I hung up the phone, I realized something. Julie's downfall wasn't just about her losing me or the material things she'd taken for granted. It was about her losing the ability to manipulate and control the people around her. And without that power, she was nothing. I poured myself a drink, leaned back in my chair, and smiled. Julie had made her bed, and now she had to lie in it. It had been 3 weeks since Julie walked out of my life, and the dust was finally starting to settle. I'd officially moved into my new apartment, a modest but comfortable space that felt like the blank canvas I desperately needed. The chaotic whirlwind of drama, betrayal, and revenge was behind me now, and I was starting to see the world through fresh eyes. But Julie wasn't done. Not yet. Julie's last attempt. One Friday evening, I got an unexpected knock at my door. I wasn't in the mood for visitors. I just cracked open a beer and was settling in for a quiet night, but something told me to check the peephole. There she was. Julie, standing on the other side of the door like a ghost from a nightmare. Her once perfect demeanor was completely gone. She looked worn down, her makeup barely masking the dark circles under her eyes. She was clutching a folder to her chest, her expression desperate. For a moment, I considered ignoring her. But curiosity got the better of me. I opened the door slightly, keeping the chain on. What do you want, Julie? She took a deep breath, her voice trembling. I need to talk to you. Please, Liam. Just hear me out. I didn't respond right away, letting her squirm under the weight of the silence. Finally, I unlatched the chain and stepped back, motioning for her to come in. She looked relieved, but I didn't offer her a seat. Instead, I crossed my arms and leaned against the counter, waiting for her to start. Julie set the folder down on the table and looked at me, her green eyes filled with something I hadn't seen in a long time, fear. I made a mistake, she began, her voice shaky. I don't mean the affair, well, I do, but it's more than that. I've lost everything, Liam. My friends, my reputation, my dignity. I raised an eyebrow, unimpressed. And whose fault is that? Her eyes filled with tears, but I didn't soften. Not this time. She wiped at her face and opened the folder, pulling out a stack of papers. These are the divorce papers, she said quietly. I've signed them. I'm not going to fight you anymore. I glanced at the papers but didn't touch them. Good. That's the first smart decision you've made in months. Julie flinched but nodded. I know you hate me, Liam. And I don't blame you. I've been awful. Selfish. But I didn't come here to beg you to take me back. I know that's not possible. For a moment, I felt a flicker of pity for her, but I quickly pushed it aside. This was the same woman who had laughed in my face, flaunted her betrayal, and tried to destroy me. Her regret now wasn't about losing me, it was about losing control. What do you want, Julie? I asked, my tone cold. She hesitated, her hands trembling. I need you to know that I'm sorry. Truly. For everything. I stared at her, searching her face for any sign of sincerity. Maybe she was sorry, or maybe this was just another performance, a last-ditch effort to salvage her pride. Either way, it didn't matter. I wasn't the same man she'd manipulated all those years. Apology accepted, I said flatly. Now, if that's all, you know where the door is. Her face crumpled, but she didn't argue. She nodded, gathered her things, and walked out without another word. As the door clicked shut behind her, I let out a long breath. That was it. The final chapter of Julie's involvement in my life. And it felt liberating. Reflection and moving on. The next morning, I went for a run along the park trail near my apartment. The air was crisp, the sun shining through the trees, and for the first time in years, I felt truly at peace. As I ran, I thought about everything that had happened, how I'd been blindsided by Julie's betrayal, how I'd fought back, and how I'd emerged stronger on the other side. There was a time when I thought my life revolved around Julie, that our marriage was the foundation of everything I'd built. But now I realized that foundation had been cracked for years, and I'd been too blind, or too afraid, to see it. Losing her wasn't the tragedy I once thought it was. It was a blessing. Mark called me later that day, his voice filled with curiosity. So, did I hear right? Julie signed the papers? She did, I confirmed. It's over. Good riddance, he said, laughing. How does it feel? I smiled, leaning back in my chair. It feels like a new beginning. Advice for the broken. As I sat there, reflecting on everything, I thought about the countless men and women who've been in my shoes, betrayed, humiliated, left to pick up the pieces of their shattered lives. If there was one thing I'd learned from this experience, it was this: never let anyone make you feel small. Whether it's a spouse, a friend, or anyone else, you have the right to stand up for yourself and demand respect. Julie's betrayal had broken me at first, but it also forced me to rebuild. And in rebuilding, I'd found strength I didn't know I had. Strength to walk away, to let go, and to start over. To anyone reading this who's been hurt like I was, my advice is simple: don't waste your time trying to change someone who doesn't value you. Focus on yourself, on your happiness, and on the life you want to build. Because at the end of the day, you're the only one who can decide what you're worth. And trust me, you're worth more than someone like Julie.